David Gengan from the Pietermaritzburg Gandhi Memorial Committee. Our committee decided some years back that the story of the 7th of June 1893 and its impact on the young Gandhi will be told every year at its anniversary. This year, 2020, marks the 127th anniversary of that event and the 114th anniversary of the birth of Satyagraha, the weapon that was to bring freedom to India from colonial rule after he perfected it here in South Africa. The seed for Satyagraha was planted right here in Pietermaritzburg on the 7th of June 1893. Almost 7 decades after Gandhi's death, his life and legacy are still discussed and acted upon in countries that barely knew him, and he continues to loom large in the land of his birth. His ideas are praised as well as attacked, dismissed by some as dangerous or irrelevant, yet celebrated by others as key to resolving religious tensions, tensions between low and high castes, the tensions between humans and the environment. Albert Einstein said this of him, and I quote, "Generations to come, it may well be, will scarce believe that such a man as this one, ever in flesh and blood, walked upon this earth," unquote. So who was this man then, who has come to be revered as a saint in his native India, and indeed around the world? Who was the man that was flung out? Who was it that fell? Who was it that rose from his humiliation? And what was the immediate impact of this humiliation on the young Gandhi? And how did it influence his life and the various philosophies that he espoused? Gopal Krishna Gandhi, a grandson and former High Commissioner of India to South Africa, said the following in 1997, when the city honored Gandhi posthumously with the freedom of the city. He said, and I quote, "The question may be answered thus. When Gandhi was evicted from the train, an Indian visiting South Africa fell. But when Gandhi rose, an Indian South African rose. The Indian and the South African merged in him the instant he fell, doubtless with astonished disbelief. This must have turned the next instant to fury. But in an alchemy that was uniquely his own, it turned also into something totally different, something creative, redemptive, something that changed shock into transformational resolve. Gandhi fell with a railway ticket no one honored. He rose with a testament none could ignore. He fell a passenger, but rose a patriot. He fell a barrister, but rose a revolutionary. His legal brief became a political cause. His sense of human decency transformed itself into a passion for human justice. The personal died within him that moment and turned public. Mine became thine. In fact, Mohandas Gandhi was not flung here, he was launched," unquote. About the incident itself, Gandhi said in his book, My Experiments with Truth, that 8 days after his arrival in Durban, Dada Abdullah booked him a first-class berth on the train to Pretoria. Actually, the train only went as far as Charlestown then, and one had to travel by coach until Johannesburg. He said that he saved 5 shillings by not paying for the bedding. When the train arrived at the station in Pietermaritzburg at about 9 o'clock that cold winter's night, a railway worker came into the compartment and asked whether he needed bedding. This man was followed by a passenger who, when he entered the compartment, looked Gandhi up and down, looking disturbed. He left and returned with 2 officials, and he was instructed to go to the van compartment. Gandhi refused, saying that he was allowed to travel from Durban on a first-class ticket and he would not get out voluntarily. A police constable was then summoned and Gandhi was pushed out of the train with his luggage following. While he sat here in the waiting room, he said he began to think of his duty. Should he fight for his rights or go back to India, or go on to Pretoria without minding the insult? He decided that to return to India without fulfilling his obligation would be cowardice. He realized later that morning that the insult he felt was superficial and a symptom of deep color prejudice, and he decided he would stay and try to root out the problem. The following morning, he sent a telegram to the general manager of the railways, expressing his protest at the treatment he had received in Pietermaritzburg. He also sent a telegram to Dada Abdullah, who immediately contacted the general manager, who justified the conduct of the railway officials, but also instructed the station manager to ensure Gandhi's safe passage to his destination. Dada Abdullah also contacted some friends and Indian businessmen in Maritzburg who met with Gandhi and told him of some of the hardships they experienced through the color bar. He was told then that Indians traveling first or second class had to expect trouble from railway officials and white passengers. He departed on the evening train, this time purchasing a bedding ticket that he refused in Durban. But his ordeal was not over. On reaching Charlestown at the Natal-Transvaal border, He had to transfer to a stagecoach because the line ended there. On seeing his ticket for the coach and realizing he was a stranger, he was told that his ticket was cancelled. After some negotiation, he was allowed to sit in the seat of the coach leader in the coach box outside of the coach. Gandhi said that he knew it was another insult, but decided it would make no difference to protest the injustice, which would have resulted in the coach going off without him, and he would have lost another day. So he sat beside the coachman until the coach reached Pietermaritzburg in the Transvaal at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. The leader wanted his seat back because he wanted to smoke, and he spread a dirty sackcloth on the floorboard and ordered Gandhi to sit on it. This insult was too much to bear, and although fearful, Gandhi protested and refused to be seated there. He said that the giant of a man boxed him around the ears and tried to drag him down, but he hung onto the railings until the intervention of the passengers, who insisted that Gandhi be seated inside the coach. The coach stayed overnight in Standerton, and Gandhi wrote a letter to the company protesting his treatment and requesting a trouble-free journey to Johannesburg, which he was granted, travelling in a bigger coach. He was met by Abdul Ghani Sheth, who, on listening to the events of Gandhi's journey, warned him of what to expect in the Transvaal, including the fact that he would have to travel third class to Pretoria the next day. Gandhi refused, saying that he would rather take a cab to Pretoria. They then decided to send a note to the station master indicating that he always travelled first class and that he needed to get to Pretoria urgently, and that as there was no time to await his reply, he would receive it in person at the station the next day. Gandhi went to the station in his frock coat and necktie and placed a sovereign for his ticket on the counter. On confirming that it was Gandhi who sent the note, the manager issued him a first-class ticket, absolving himself of any responsibility for anybody asking him to move to third class. Sheth warned him on seeing him off that the guards were bound to ask him to move, saying these people were worse than their counterparts in Natal. True to his word at Germiston, the guard, on examining the tickets, insisted that Gandhi moved to third class, ignoring the first-class ticket. A fellow passenger took the guard to task, insisting that he remain, seeing that he had the required ticket. The guard responded, "If you want to travel with a coolie, what do I care?" Gandhi then reached Pretoria at 8 o'clock that evening. And so began Gandhi's first 2 weeks in South Africa. So the question is, what was the significance of this event? And why have we chosen to commemorate it each year to tell the story? This incident started his active non-violence and planted the seed for the formation of Satyagraha, which stands for truth force, which sometimes is loosely translated to be passive resistance. Gandhi's philosophy of non-violence was greatly influenced by the Quran. In fact, he was given a copy of the Quran when he boarded the train in Durban, and also the Sermon on the Mount found in the book of Matthew in the Bible, when Jesus said, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Love your enemies, bless them that curse you, do good to them that hate you, and pray for them that despitefully use you and persecute you." In South Africa, Satyagraha was used to pressure the government to scrap the need for registration, to scrap the £3 tax imposed on free indentured labourers who chose to stay in the country, and to recognise marriages conducted under Indian religious rites. Gandhi's 21 years in South Africa shaped his philosophy, especially as it relates to peace and non-violence, which, given what is happening around the world today, is so relevant to achieving a peaceful society where human life is respected. The 7th of June 1893 is where it all started, at the railway station in Pietermaritzburg. So who was this young man that was flung out here on this platform in Pietermaritzburg? Gandhi's biographer described him as a child of an ancient and noble race. His father, grandfather and uncle were prime ministers of their respective courts. His childhood and youth were spent in India, where he was familiar with the splendour of an eastern palace. He was born in Porbandar in the state of Gujarat in northwest India on 2nd October 1869. Porbandar was a fishing port in those days. He was born into the Banya class, the middle class below the Kshatriyas and Brahmins. His father worked for the government and was a prime minister of the court. His mother, at Jain, exposed the young Mohandas to the idea of non-violence as a road to spiritual and social equality. The family later moved to Rajkot, where his father was the state prime minister. And so he departed India in April 1893 at the age of 23 to, in his words, try his luck in South Africa. The case lasted a year, and at its conclusion, he returned to Durban to prepare for his departure to India. At his farewell, The issue of the Indian franchise came up, and he was persuaded to stay for another month to make representations to stop the bill. He was to stay another 2 years in South Africa, during which time he established the Natal Indian Congress in 1894, the first political black formation in South Africa. He left again for India in 1896 to bring his wife and sons to South Africa. They stayed for 2 decades, and it was during this time that he experimented with truth and developed the core tenets of his philosophy in all aspects of life. This was in between his work as a lawyer, an activist, passive resistor in Natal and the Transvaal, taking up the various protest actions against discriminatory laws and regulations. He left South Africa on 18 July 1914, soon after the Indian Relief Bill was passed in Parliament. His work in South Africa was done. On his departure, when Smuts said, and I quote, "The saint has left our shores, I hope forever," unquote, he had no idea of the legacy that Gandhi would leave and the impact that his ideals would have on the liberation of our country and the struggles for freedom in other parts of the world. Former President Nelson Mandela said in his speech here in 1997, and I quote, "He showed us that it was necessary to brave imprisonment if truth and justice were to triumph over evil. The values of tolerance, mutual respect, and unity for which he stood and acted had a profound influence on our liberation movement and on my own thinking. They inspire us today in our efforts of reconciliation and nation building," unquote. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, and I quote, "Love for Gandhi was a potent instrument for social and collective transformation. It was in this Gandhian emphasis on love and non-violence that I discovered the method for social reform that I had been seeking," unquote. The world has come to know Gandhi as the thin older man in a homespun dhoti and shawl leading the independence struggle in India. He came to us in South Africa as a shy young barrister wearing the frock coat and patent leather shoes of his profession. Ramachandra Guha, the Indian author, said he was an unlikely candidate for the compelling episode of self-definition from which he emerged a confident public figure and an accomplished political organizer by the time he left in 1914. It was here that he came to acquire and practice his 4 major callings. Those of freedom fighter, social reformer, religious pluralist, and prophet. In conclusion, it is appropriate to quote a portion of the poem written by the late Fatima Mir on the occasion of the freedom of the city, given posthumously to Gandhi in 1997. This is what she said. "Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, you passed through our city once, 123 years ago today. You were thrown out of your train compartment here on our station in Pietermaritzburg for asserting your rights as an Indian, a black man, as a universal colonized man. You turned the insult and the pain into satyagraha, ahimsa, into Sarvodaya, the abode of peace, love and equity among all members of the human race. We know now the passion that inspired you, the passion that stirred within you to liberate, to battle tireless against racism, casteism, inequality, injustice, untruth, ignorance, and violence. We invoke your spirit, abide with us eternally so that we may be bathed in your truth. Accept these our words, our atonement and apology." Finally, as we look at the mayhem in the world around us today, perhaps we should ponder on the words of this great soul who said, and I quote, "You must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty," unquote. We need to find our humanity, and the best way to do that is to lose ourselves in the service of others.